Welcome to this edition of NYSE Governance Services Inside Compliance. I'm Erica Salmon-Byrne, and I'm joined today in the studio by Adam Turteltaub from the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. Adam, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We are going to be discussing a topic that I know is very much on the mind of a lot of the members of our audience, which is how do you really work effectively as a compliance officer inside of an organization? But before we get to that, for those of our audience that aren't as familiar with the SCCE, you guys are growing very quickly. So can you fill us in a little bit on what's been happening at the Society?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the growth this year is probably going to be around 20%, and I think that really reflects the tremendous growth in the compliance profession, and both domestically and internationally. We've been growing with it around the U.S., adding more regional meetings. Obviously, the annual meetings growing. We had about 12 to 1,300 people just this October in D.C. We keep adding more academies. Those are our 3.5-day training programs and how to manage a compliance program. But what's really interesting is seeing the international growth that's been going on. Right now, more than 10%, in fact, well over 10% of our membership is outside of the United States, which really reflects that this is growing. And we've been expanding the number of academies we offer, and they're starting to get pretty full. A few years ago, we did our first European Academy. We only had about 17 people. This year, we had about 55 or 60 in Brussels. We now also offer one in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We've been in Shanghai for the last 2 years, and this year we're offering our first academy in Dubai to serve the Middle East and Africa, where we actually draw a goodly number of members, and we're really happy to see that the numbers there, we're still a month out, are really, really high. So it's really been a remarkable era of growth, and I think it's been driven by several things. One is obviously the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Sure.
People are starting to really get their teeth into it and realize how much of a compliance effort you need to really manage the third-party risk area particularly. There's other areas of law as well that are causing companies a great deal of concern of late, things like data protection and privacy, as well as export controls within the U.S. has gotten to be a hot issue. And then there's ongoing management issues such as conducting internal investigations, education, training, those kinds of things as well.
So are you finding, especially the overseas piece of it, are you finding these are mostly compliance officers that are working for multinationals that are embedded in country, or are you seeing domestic companies located in country starting to create their own compliance programs?
It's mostly the multinational companies, especially the US-based ones, but secondarily the European ones. However, we're starting to see a goodly number of indigenous companies starting to do that. What's happening is as as they grow globally, they're starting to see more and more of their partners asking them, what's your compliance program? How strong is it? Because they've got questions, and these companies know that if they're going to compete on the global economy, they really need to have an effective compliance and ethics program in place.
Yeah, and that's one of the things actually that I find to be one of the most interesting trends that we're seeing is the extent to which companies, especially companies in the supply chain these days, are using their ethics and compliance program and the quality of the program to compete against other companies that are bidding for the same business. So, you know, we're hearing from companies, oh, we got the supplier questionnaire and we were so excited to be able to fill it out and show them all the things we're doing with our compliance program, because that means we're a really trusted partner. And I think that's one of the things, you know, as we see the space continue to mature, that's going to be a really interesting development, is this idea that compliance is not just a cost center, right? It's an opportunity to show that you have a business purpose as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it can be a differentiator too. I often think of the story of airbags. You know, the auto industry fought airbags for years. They thought they were going to be expensive, dangerous, consumers wouldn't buy them. Finally, they had to give in. And you know, Lee Iacocca, who was a big detractor, admitted he was wrong about this to his credit. And what do we have now? One, no one would buy a car without airbags, and two, cars differentiate themselves based on how many airbags they have.
Right.
And I think compliance is going to be the same way. It's going to give businesses globally a good advantage as you go to compete, because you'll know that people looking at bidders will know that you're someone they can trust not to get them into huge trouble.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it raises an interesting question that we talk to companies about a lot. You know, we're seeing a real trend, it's a slow trend, but it's a real trend over the course of the last several years of compliance officers increasingly reporting to the CEO. So in the last State of the Function survey that we did, it's running at about 39% of compliance officers say that they now report outside of legal. They really report to the CEO. Now it's obviously a much larger percentage in some of the highly regulated spaces like pharma and life sciences that have to interact with HHS-OIG, but it's becoming increasingly clear to a lot of companies that compliance really needs a senior seat at the table. I know there can also be some challenges there in terms of having to balance the business needs versus the compliance needs. Any thoughts that you have on that struggle and that line that the compliance officer has to walk?
Yeah, and I think what's funny is I think you hit upon the fact that some of the more regulated industries, the numbers are higher. A lot of our members are from there. So we did a survey and it was a higher number that already the majority were reporting straight to the CEO and or the board of directors. And I think it's a trend that's going to continue. I mean, for one, we're seeing cases coming out with settlements, where it's required that they report straight. There's a little bit of tension there. The general counsel's job is to defend the corporation, and a lot of time that says, let's keep this quiet, let's not, make a big deal out of it, and so forth. Where compliance is saying, wait a minute, we've identified a problem in the way we do business. We've got to change that. We have to make people aware of what the problem is and what the costs and consequences are. And then also we have to develop a system so it doesn't happen again. And also we need to let employees, most importantly, know that the company takes this seriously. That if you do something wrong, there will be consequences for it, and we're not a company that tolerates that. Now, with that said, what's interesting is our research also shows that compliance professionals, even though they want the direct reporting relationship, and again, already most do, they also work very well with legal. In fact, they've identified legal as the greatest ally within the organization. So I say it's a question that they would prefer collaboration to cohabitation.
I like that phrase. We have time. It looks like for just about one more question before we have to end our time together, and that is the one that I wanted to ask was this. Partnering with the business. This is a challenge that many of the compliance officers that I talk to on a regular basis say that they're experiencing. A lot of their business partners are so accustomed to legal being the Department of No, or compliance being the Department of No, that it's very hard to switch that mindset and get at the table early enough to influence the decisions that the business folks are making. We always talk to those clients about trying to make sure that we've got the right tone from the top to sort of get compliance at the table. But anything you're hearing or seeing as far as trends or advice to a compliance officer on how to get that visibility into the business? Yeah,
I think there's several things. One is that you need to be out there. You can't only appear when there's a problem. And we've got a book that Joe Murphy wrote called Compliance on $1 a Day. It's ideas for small and medium enterprises. It's a free pamphlet people can download. And one of the things it does is talk about walking around. Now, obviously that works better in a small company than a larger company, but giving people as much as you can, even a larger company, a face and a name so that they know compliance isn't just a department, it's people. What it does is it encourages people to talk and come forward and raise issues. And that can help both make people feel more comfortable when they see a problem, but also can help compliance people understand the business better. And things like when you conduct a risk assessment, making sure that the assessment reflects the legal risk, but also how they affect the business is very helpful as well. The other thing that we see people do is partner with other departments, whether it's legal or it's internal audit, that is in and out of business units, checking on what's going on, seeing what you can learn from them about what are the issue areas that they're seeing in internal audit as they look at a business unit, so you can better assess that too. The one caution, though, is the job of compliance, though, in the end, is really to find and fix problems. And if and people in the past have not been so good at fixing the problems. As much as you get involved in the business and get to understand it, you do have to know that at the end of the day, when there's a problem, you're not there to come up with a business solution. You're there to make sure that the business operates properly and that you work with the business unit so they design a system to make sure that they do.
Yeah, and hopefully, hopefully you've over the course of the time of walking around and talking to those people, you've developed enough of a relationship with some of the people in those business units that when they're making a decision to go into an area that might have compliance challenges associated with it, they involve the compliance professionals on the front end of that decision-making process so that they can be the yes but.
Yes.
And structure that in such a way that there hopefully won't be issues down the road.
Exactly. And fortunately, when it comes to most of the big issues out there, other companies have gone before, and compliance people, if they're on top of it, have gone to conferences, read articles, whatever, so they know how other businesses have approached this problem and can come up with an appropriate solution.
Yeah, I don't want to leave this topic, Adam, without touching briefly on the list of partners that you mentioned. Going back to the very beginning comment that you made about data privacy and what an increasing concern that is for a lot of organizations, what about partnerships with IT? What are you hearing from your members about partnering with their IT colleagues?
Well, interestingly enough, some of the data indicates that compliance has already taken over responsibility for data security, that those kinds of breaches are coming to them. Interestingly enough, as you look to partner with IT, one of the things that we've found is that the biggest problem isn't necessarily the structure of your IT, it's still the human factors. Mm-hmm. The chief cause of data breaches is human errors. It's lost files, it's stolen laptops, it's thumb drives that get misplaced, it's phishing, it's those kinds of things. So it's, you can't discount the importance of protecting your system against hackers and others who have nefarious plans, including your own people who may be looking to take advantage of your systems. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is sort of the dopey behaviors that people do and the simple things we all do, which is, misplace that little thumb drive. You lend it to your kid because, he or she needs to bring in a paper for school and lose track of the fact that there was all sorts of confidential data, and by the way, your kid just lost it on the playground.
Right. Right, yeah, it goes back to the old adage, right, that the purpose of compliance is to keep your employees from doing the stupid thing in the first place. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations on the growth of SCCE. It's been very exciting, and we look forward to having you back on the program at some point in the future to discuss these topics
Thank you. I'd love to do it.
Okay, and thank you all for joining us for this edition of Inside Compliance. I'm Erica Salmon-Byrne, and I'll see you next time.